Welcome to Son Coaches Podcast, Season 9, brought to you by Scoreboard Fundraising. And I'm so glad tonight to be joined by a coach that has coached in 3 different states. He's coached at a lot of different classifications. And he's got a great story. I hope you enjoy listening to the new head coach at Cherokee High School, Coach T.C. Geyer. Thanks for being on with me.
Yes, sir, Chris. Appreciate you having me on, man.
So where did you actually grow up? I know you've coached in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia.
Yes,
So
sir.
you grew up in Pisgah, right?
Yeah, so Pisgah's actually a high school in Canton, North Carolina. It's about 30 minutes west of Asheville. You know, a small little paper town where, you know, in our county, there's 2 high schools, Pisgah, Tuscola. Football's king there. You know, it's what, you know, you grow up, that's what you want to do. That's where you are on Friday nights. You're either watching family members play or you're playing in the field on the side of the stadium, and you know those 2 teams get together. And I mean, no lie, people kind of look at me funny when I tell them this, but it's upward of about 10,000 people. I think a couple of years ago, somebody took home about $50,000 on a half and half for a high school football game. So that's originally where I'm from, and we've kind of been a nomad here for a while now.
So what all did you play in high school besides football, or were you just a football guy?
That was it. You know, I did track for 2 years. Didn't really participate in track for the track purposes. A high school boy, go to track meets, watch some girls run, you know, try to get some phone numbers kind of thing. That's what it was. So
there you go.
Yeah.
And then you went to Mars Hill.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Went there and, you know, I tell everybody this, I thought I was better than what I was. You know, small mountain kid, West North Carolina. You think you're the top of the game. Get there and, you know, Denzel Good, who graduated from there, played 9 years in the league as a starting offensive tackle. And I said, yeah, I'm not that good. So quickly, you know, I realized that and became a student assistant. You know, was able to work under Chuck Pfeiffer directly hand in hand, their defensive line coach who played at App State. I've had some semi-pro stuff going on, but was able to learn a lot from him and all those guys there. So that's really where it got started.
So you knew you wanted to be a coach and teach. That wasn't like you didn't get in the wrong line. You knew what you were getting into.
Yes, sir. Yeah. You know, first and 2, you know, even before all that, you know, growing up, my dad's also a coach. Now he's not a football coach. He's a swim coach.
Don't matter. Coaches kids or coaches kids.
That's it. You know, but looking at me and, you know, looking at him, you would not say he's a swim coach. You know, he was a power lifter and just kind of fell into, you know, lifeguarding and everything, and then started swimming. He started 3 collegiate programs. I'm in the Hall of Fame at one, and probably going to be in the Hall of Fame at another here soon. You know, he's successful. But, you know, my parents will tell you to this day, you know, at 5 years old, I had a throw blanket, Miami Dolphins. You know, don't hate me, Miami Dolphin fan here, but throw blanket of their football field, and I'd be out, you know, 5 years old making football plays with football cards. You know, I've got probably, you know, some valuable cards that are now, you know, no longer mint condition because they were tackling and running touchdowns and all that stuff back in the day. So, you know, it was something that I was used to seeing early on. And yeah, you know, just, you know, from the jump, just realized, you know, hey, when the time's up to hang the helmet and shoulder pads up, you know, let's pick up a headset and do it.
Awesome. So what was your first job outside of Mars Hill once you got like a real job, quote unquote?
Yeah, so real job, and it was in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So I found out on a Thursday that I got the job and had to be down there on Monday. So literally in the matter of a couple of days, packed up my life. You know, drove to the eastern part of the state, and I was the head coach at Douglasburg Middle School and also defensive line coach at the high school. So I was split between both. You know, just out there, you know, single guy living in an apartment and coaching ball. I mean, that's what it was, you know. So I spent a year there and then found my way back to Western North Carolina, and Avery County is really where the whole process got started.
So what did you do there? What was your position there?
So there I was a defensive line coach for 2 years under Jason Phelps, and then Mac Bryan, who, you know, he's the guy. He's been all over UT Chattanooga, UT Martin, a couple head coaching jobs in North and South Carolina. He came in after my second year there, and that's really where, I tell people I kind of took off from that point because, at that point I'm 27, 28 years old. And we sit down and he has an interview. I want to interview with all the guys on staff, and he says, I'm going to give you access to everything. He says, you're going to be in charge of it all. You're the assistant head coach. And I'm like, okay. He said, and he asked me, he said, what are your goals coaching wise? And I said, eventually, I want to be a head coach. He said, well, before that, you got to be a defensive coordinator. So he, in his wisdom, moved me back to linebackers, back to secondary, to kind of learn the whole thing, because at that point, I could coach the defensive line. I could tell them how to squeeze a down block and all that stuff. I could coach the heck out of the defensive line. But that back end is what I lacked. And he saw that. But, also at that point in time, I was ordering, I was scheduling, I was in charge of travel, recruiting, academics, discipline, weightlifting. So basically everything, that an older head coach didn't want to do, he gave to me and said, hey, you do it. And that's where I really got the jump. And also up there in Avery County, I would not be in a good spot if I failed to mention, I met my wonderful wife up there. Ran into her after a game. I was coaching one of her nephews and literally ran into her. And surprised by my attitude that she agreed to go out on the date with me. We that worked out well for me. So we're there. We are.
So how long you were there for? 2 years.
Well, they're 2 years under Phelps, and then 3 years under Coach Bryan, and ended up leaving.
So where did you go to after that?
After that, Coach Bryan was, again, older guy, kind of could see the things. We kind of ran the well dry there at Avery County at the time being. We had a good team. Quarterback ended up at Wake Forest as a PWO, and he sent me to Coffee County, Tennessee, to work under Doug Green for a year, his longtime buddy and defense coordinator. So I was over in Middle Tennessee and Manchester. We packed up and moved over there, and learned a lot. We were part of a very successful team, in recent years for Coffee County. They had TSSAA 6A in interceptions in the regular season. It made it to the playoffs, which they hadn't done in 10 plus years, and were neck and neck with Riverdale in the first round, ended up losing to them. And then after that, was able to reconnect with Coach Bryan down in Georgia at Lakeview, Fort Oglethorpe, and spent 2 years there.
At LFO as the DC?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's right there. Like, you go to Chattanooga if you want something, right?
Yeah. We actually lived in Ringgold, and we could be in Chattanooga in 10 minutes from our house. And my daughter, who's now 3 years old, was born in Chattanooga, and we spent 2 years there, enjoyed it. Didn't necessarily get to stick around and see the fruits of our labor per se. They made these past 2 years, they've been good, but I was at the point in time where I felt like I needed to kind of spread my wings and go make my own name. So
is that when you got the DEA job?
That's when I got the DEA job. Yes, sir. 24, got the DEA job. Took that. One of it was, at the time, as a father having a daughter in that area, we kind of said, hey, look, like I really don't know if I want her, attending public school. Just kind of in the area, not to knock on it, but Chattanooga's a big place, so there's a lot more problems than you have in small town USA. And too, my whole thing was, I wanted to kind of get my footing in Georgia, wanted to kind of establish that, and went down to DEA, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the small knit community that it was, and really enjoyed my time there. And then while we're down there, we end up having another child, and now we've got a 1-year-old son, a 3-year-old daughter, and we're sitting here like we're 4 hours away from my parents. We're 6 hours away from your parents. It may be time to get closer. And Then kind of without looking, Cherokee kind of popped up on my radar, and I'm a very firm believer that if something kind of falls into your lap, you really need to take a hard look at it, and we did, and just felt like it was the right time. Now, 10 years ago, if you would have asked me, hey, would you be back in Western North Carolina or North Carolina in general? I would have said absolutely not. There's no way, shape, or form. Even 3 years ago. I mean, I was set. I'm going to establish myself in Georgia. That's where we're going to be. But the Cherokee job, it's a bit of an outlier when it comes to North Carolina. It's a little different than most North Carolina jobs. Not only facility wise, but financial wise too. So it felt like it was the right time and right place, and we're happy. We're excited to get back up here, get close to family. My family is beyond excited. They get to see the grandbabies.
Oh yeah.
My brothers get to see their niece and nephew more than just Christmas and birthdays. My cousins who still have yet to even meet my children now get to see them. So, it's a good spot, and we'll sit here and try to get in the right direction.
Well, how big of a school is Cherokee High School? Comparable
So
to Georgia schools?
Cherokee were to play in the GHSA, they would be probably one of your smallest single A schools.
Okay, so it's a small school like DA.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's about 500 in the high school.
Okay.
Now the picture that's floating around Facebook that I post or Twitter, excuse me, that I posted, that is all K through 12 in one kind of campus. So that's why it looks as as large as it does. People have said, "Hey, is that just a high school?" No, that's your K all the
All
way
of
up
them.
to. Yep, that's all of them right there. So
There's nothing wrong with that.
there's not. That's another thing that drew that drew us to there is when my daughter gets of age, now she's on campus with me, which is a huge plus, to be able to, load her up in the truck and take her to school with me, and drop her off in the mornings, something a lot of coaches don't get to do. Just to be able to, have those mornings, on the way to work with her, as she's getting older and stuff. That's definitely something that drew us to Cherokee.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, one of my only personal regrets, not that any of this is about me, but I didn't get to do high school with my son, and it sucks.
Yeah.
I'd have loved to get to eat lunch with him every day or been there,
Mhm.
for him to put his book bag in my office and stuff like that. But I made choices,
Absolutely.
and it just the way it is. So that's awesome that you're going to get to have your children there with you. And at DEA, being a GIAA school, being a little bit smaller,
Yes.
you're not going to be shocked. You know how to run a practice with 20 people on the football team.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I'm not
Yes.
saying you're going to have 20 at Cherokee,
Yeah.
but you've done it with. I've had Andy Woodard on last week, and he's at
Mhm.
EBA now, and he started at
Yeah.
DEA, and he was like, "Well, yeah, sometimes assistant coaches have to be scout team because
Oh yeah.
to get 11,
Yeah.
or you go half line."
Absolutely.
And I think that's
Absolutely.
awesome. I think the smaller the classification is that you're in, and some of the big school guys, they're gonna torch me on this, and that's okay. I don't care because some of them have never. Hey, some of them hadn't chewed dirt at them small schools.
Well, yeah.
They ain't been down there in Stillmore and seen what gets
No.
down when you got 17, and they can wear whatever number they want to because that's what you got to do.
That's it. That's
And
it.
I mean, to me, you coach more at a smaller school because you have to. I mean, you can't just be
yeah.
like, I'm gonna just be the offensive coordinator. Well, no, there's only like 3 of you probably.
Yeah. 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 That's it. I mean, year one we got there, and it was me and one. That's what it was. It was me and one guy on the staff, and he was still in college.
Yeah, I remember
he
you
just got.
asking me if I knew anybody, and I was like,
Yeah.
best route is go get a college, go get a
Yep.
young dude or
That's.
get 3 young
Hmm.
guys.
Yeah. And he just graduated from ECI, maybe 2 years ago, and he wanted, he was a youth pastor in the area. He knew some of the kids. I said, "Hey, come on, man, let's go. Let's." But year one we're down there, and I'm taking time out of class to paint the field.
Yeah.
I mean, and then year two we hired 2 guys, so we were able to bump that staff up to 4. But calling the offense, coaching the offensive and defensive line, that was year 2 for me. I mean, everybody's throwing in on special teams, and it's just we got lucky this year. We had a donor donate us a turf tank, so we all we had to do was sit out there and hit the button and let that roll. But again, we're out there this summer and we're repainting field goal posts. I'm doing laundry as a head coach. I never would have thought, you know, 10, 15 years ago, a head coach does the team's laundry. I thought, as a student assistant at Mars Hill, I just knew, hey, I did the laundry. Head coaches didn't touch the laundry. But now, I get up there and I'm in a home washer and dryer nonetheless too. I'm washing the laundry on a home washer and dryer. 3 coaches this year, head coaches, we share an office. It's not so, if you gotta have a meeting with a kid, hey guys, I need the office from 12 to 1. You gotta schedule things. And yeah, I mean it's not to knock on the big schools, because at Coffee County we were 6A. We were the biggest up there. LFO, at the time we were 3A. Douglasburg was also a large high school. Avery County was smaller, but those small guys, they got to do a lot.
Absolutely. And it's good that you already knew, you'd done it as a student assistant at the college level, and you kind of knew
Yes,
not to turn your nose up at it. And when you're the head coach, it's got to get done. And you don't really
absolutely.
care. You don't really care who does it.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah.
means you got to get in there and do it.
Oh yeah.
Because it's got to get done. And that's
Absolutely.
the thing that people need to understand is there's going to be times where there's stuff that only you can deal with. So the assistant coaches have to step up and go take care of, the little stuff when they can. But when you're on a smaller staff and you're the head coach, you may have to pull a string. You may have to clean up, or, unless you got a turf tank, which is the greatest thing ever invented. I sat out there and watched it when we got one. Yeah, I was amazed. I mean, it was like watching the first man land on the moon. I was like, this is awesome. Whoever came up with this is brilliant.
Making a bunch of money,
Lots of money.
Looking like, why did we not come up with this?
Mad that I didn't come up with that. Just like,
absolutely.
I mean, yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. And it does whatever you want it to do. I mean, I'm like calling people going, have you seen this thing? It's amazing. And I can barely get, we had technical difficulty. Well, I had technical difficulties getting this thing uploaded. I can't even operate a freaking computer. And that thing's, because I asked the guy when he did, I was like, hey man, what if it's wrong? He was like, it ain't gonna be wrong. He said, what you might find out is that your field is your stands are crooked. When they made the fences, he goes, this is going to be right. He's like, listen, now you may see that your fence isn't straight.
That is what we found out at David Emanuel. That is, down there in Stillmore, we found out, well, this, where we had the field year 1, it was kind of funny after we got it painted. I was like, this ain't right. This is not how it was painted last year. And he says, show me where your end zone line was last year. And I showed him where the back corner of the end zone. He said, Coach, he said, you were painting an extra 1.5 yards. I said, no wonder I love throwing fade balls down in this corner of the end zone. There ain't no wonder right there. So, I mean, but it's crazy what that thing can do, the satellite and everything. But yeah, we found out that, DEA was definitely not centered at the time.
Well, hey, coaches, if your team needs to raise money, check out Scoreboard Fundraising. In the past year, they've helped more than 1,000 teams across the Southeast run simple, effective fundraisers from popcorn to online donations. Call Mike James at 770-680-3424 or visit scoreboardfundraising.com. A lot of the teams I know are using these guys. I know Carrollton uses them. I know a lot of schools in Metro Atlanta have used them, raise a lot of money. A lot of teams I know are using them. So, again, that's Mike James at 770-680-3424. They're our title sponsor for the next 4 seasons. We sure are glad to be on board with those guys. Most of the sales reps you're going to deal with are old coaches. They get us. They understand what we go through and what we have to deal with. So make sure you check them out. That's scoreboardfundraising.com. All right, so let's talk football a little bit. We're not going to get into X's and O's. We don't do that here. There's enough of that out there. We talk about logistics and what you have to deal with. So I'm sure at all of your stops, like everybody does, you learn things to do and things not to do. And like you were making a little notebook of, when I get to be a head coach, I'm going to make sure blah, 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 blah. So you got your chance at David Emanuel. And I know GIAA is a little bit different. And I'm sure North Carolina rules are a little bit different than Tennessee or Georgia. How do you approach spring ball? Or how are you going to approach spring ball?
Well, so North Carolina is different. When it comes to the spring ball, you have basically 14 allotted days to get in your 10 workouts. OTAs basically is what they are. You can't have the whole team out there. You're limited on numbers, and that's one thing that I've really kind of sat down and looked at, and also called around to some guys that I know in the area. Ask them, hey, how'd you do this year one, X and O? What'd you do? And the thing that I've kind of come to figure out at a small school, when I was up there a couple weeks ago on a Friday, and the football wait period, there's 6 kids because everybody else is playing baseball or track. What's the point in doing spring ball if I'm only going to have 4 kids there?
Right.
Because 50% of my team is at track and baseball, or at track, and the other 45 is at baseball. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go in. We're going to lift them heavy in the summer or in the spring. I start April 7th up there. We're going to lift them heavy, do some conditioning on Wednesdays. And then June 1st, they get out of school Memorial Day. I'm going to give them that week. And June 1st, we're going to hit the ground running. Now, again, something that you learn, I went into DEA thinking, we're going to go 4 days a week, 4 hours a day, and we're just going to grind. We're just going to grind. Kids don't want to do that no more. Kids don't want to do that no more. They want to go home. They want to go make some money. They want to go see the girls, whatever. But so, had I been at DEA this year, I was planning on scaling that back to 3 days a week for 3 hours. Quick little skill development, a lift, and some conditioning. Send them home. Give them, have them there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, give them the weekend. Because this is year one and we are kind of limited on what we can do spring practice, and I've chosen not to do that. We're gonna have to come in, just to install new schemes and stuff a lot. And we're gonna go, 4 days a week in the summer starting June 1. 8 to 12. 12 o'clock is the hard pickup time. I've already told a lot of people that's your hard pickup time. If it's past 12, I messed up. Again, kids these days are different. I know when I was in school, if the facility was open, we were there. We were there, and we didn't necessarily leave until we got kicked out. But now they've got so much stuff they want to do. But year one, I feel like it's important to make sure we're there, and we're able to get that scheme installed. So we're gonna hold off, save for the lifting and everything, to make sure we get stronger and kick it up June 1st.
So because you're not doing a spring, does North Carolina do like Georgia and give you 2 scrimmages in the fall, or you just aren't doing a spring?
So even with your whole spring practice in North Carolina, you cannot have any scrimmage in the spring. You get your 2 in the fall. So we're working on hammering in some final details for our 2 in the fall. So we'll have 2 right there at the start of August. Again, football season starting way too early, but we'll have our 2. So
that's a whole nother episode right there.
Whole nother one.
Dealing with the schedule. Well, coming from DEA and going there again, going from small school to small school, the idea of sharing athletes is not foreign to you. It's not like, oh my God, what do you mean they're playing? You got 50 boys, let's say, that can play, that are athletes. Them 50 boys need to play everything you got.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It ain't bad for them. It ain't gonna hurt them. They're doing something.
Oh yeah.
And in the summertime, you get them, like you said, you got to do what you got to do to get them ready. And another question I have, because I don't know anything about North Carolina high school football, is can you guys do OTAs? Can y'all do 7-on-7s, or is it just you and your guys and that's it until the scrimmage game?
So we can do 7-on-7s. There are no OTAs or padded camps. So it is strictly 7-on-7s. Now I do have one scheduled where there's going to be about 10 teams at one site, and we're going to do, big round robin 7-on-7, and the linemen are also going to do a quote unquote lineman challenge, pulling stuff, pushing stuff, just all that kind of stuff. The lineman challenge, along with the 7-on-7, is about the most you can do in North Carolina. So we're definitely going to go to that and try to hammer that in. But yeah, it's 7-on-7 until scrimmage. You're just banging against each other until scrimmage time.
Well, that's not bad. I mean, because you can work a lot of things with that. And at least you can go pick up with other people and do other things with them and let them hey coach, can you run that back? Or, can we see that again? That kind
Oh
of
yeah.
stuff. I kind of miss those old days when we first were doing 7-on-7s where it was slowed down and you could.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just work with like 2 or 3 schools personally,
Yeah,
because then, if you need to see a coverage again, or if you need to see a different set, you're out there teaching, and
absolutely.
nobody's trying to win the world championship 7-on-7 trophy.
No, no, and that's one thing I've definitely tried to do. With scheduling our 7-on-7s, is I still got a lot of buddies up here, who are head coaches now in this area, and we've tried to schedule a lot with them. Just having them come to us or us go to them, just so just like you talked about, you're able to sit there and really just work your craft and not necessarily worry about, oh well, we got to go out and get this trophy or get this belt, and make all these highlight plays. No, we're just going to work our craft. So that's what we're going to do.
So your staff at the new place, how many did you have to inherit? How many did you get to bring with you? What's that going to look like?
Yes, sir. So I have inherited four. Last year they actually had an interim head coach. Excuse me, but they had an interim head coach last year. So him and three other gentlemen from their staff are inherited with me. And another topic we can get into after this, but the interim head coach was actually my offensive line coach in high school. That's gonna be a different dynamic. But and I have two spots open for paid staff members for
Well, that's
stipend
good.
guys.
Well, that's good.
So yep. So we're I'm reaching out to guys that I know all over, saying, hey, look, come on with me, and trying to get them in, and then volunteer guys. They basically said if however many volunteers you want, you can have. There's one guy who is actually Cherokee native that I went to Mars Hill with. He lives there, and I've already spoken with him, saying, "Hey, look, you want to come do this thing? Volunteer. I can't pay you a stipend, but we'll figure out some way to compensate you."
Yeah, that's awesome. So, what are you thinking when you go into Cherokee or when you went into DEA? What's the very first thing you want to establish as far as putting your stamp on it, letting the kids know? I mean, other than building a relationship with the kids, what's
Yes, sir.
the nuts and bolts of building your program, establishing your culture? What is it that you want to get done? Do you have a 30-day plan, or you just know in your head, hey, we're going to do, got to get the weight room right, or it sounds like you got your staff pretty much in place working on that. What's
The next step is, at both places, at David Emanuel and at Cherokee, is that weight room aspect. And this may be old school thinking, and some guys, with all the certifications and stuff, may get on here and say, coach, we can't do this or whatever. But I'm a firm believer that a high school athlete, just get them strong. Put some weight on the bar. Let's get them stronger. There's no need, in my opinion, I really don't see a big need in having a baseball player do a baseball specific workout. Because at that point, again, especially at places where I've been, those baseball players are also your basketball players. He may also be your quarterback. Let's get him strong, help him out in all aspects. And at DEA, the weight room was not as important as what I think it should be. So what we do is I go in, and day one I'm in there. I want to see what they can do. What's your one rep max? Let's test it. Let's see how we are, and then I have categories based off your bench, your power clean, and your squat. Okay, we're gonna put you up in a category, and if you're a senior and you're in the Cherokee Brave Club, that means you're 0 to 599. You're down there. You're low. Now we're gonna throw you a T-shirt. 0 to 599. No kid wants to walk around with a shirt that says zero on it, So now okay. Now we've got something to sit there and aim at, and we go Cherokee Brave, we go Top Brave, Iron Brave, Super Brave, and then there's Golden Brave, which is 1,100 pounds or over, and that is the shirt of all shirts. Your Cherokee Brave is going to be a little gray shirt, and then we're going to get into more team colors. But that Golden Brave, black shirt, gold letters, there ain't going to be many of those floating around. So, okay, now I want to get that shirt. I want to get up there. I've got a buddy who's at 625. I'm at 575. I want to be more than him. So we established that weight room by healthy competition. And again, rewarding these kids for the work they're putting in, because in today's age, you know as well as I do, it's all about, hey, if I do this, what are you going to do for me? So that's just how it is. And so, and what I try to do is I try to make the weight room fun. I'll be in there with water bottles and I'll take a pin and I'll poke a hole in the lid and the kid gets a big lift and I'm spraying water around and jumping up and down and, we're jamming the music and all that stuff, but we're also working. We're having fun with it. So that's the big thing that I tried to establish at DEA when I was first got there, and then I'm also going to try to establish here at Cherokee when we first get there. It's just that weight room and that love for it, because if at the end of the day, Jimmy's and Joe's are one thing, but even if I ain't got the Jimmy's and Joe's, if my guys are stronger than yours, it's going to help us out a little bit.
Well, absolutely. I mean, everybody can get a little bit stronger.
Absolutely.
And some of them get a lot stronger. And
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of picking up heavy things, and I have
Yep.
certifications and I have the PhD and all this other stuff. But I know this, it's high school athletics, like you said. And I'll argue people till hell won't have it. I don't really care. If you pick up heavy things, you're going to get good at picking up heavy things.
Absolutely.
And that's just the bottom line. I mean, there's a reason that the old Big Five people they did them forever and they worked.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is you do. If you do bigger, faster, stronger, guess what? You're going to get bigger, faster, stronger. If you do fatter, dumber, slower, you're going to get fatter, dumber, and slower. I mean,
absolutely.
It just doesn't matter what it is. And speed training, all that other stuff. And I love seeing all the new stuff. Don't get me wrong. And I like specificity and I understand the science behind it. I get all of that. I don't have any problem with that. But it's not one size fits all for your program. No. That might not be what's best for the Cherokee Braves. That might not be what's best for you and your kids. Yeah. Don't do it just because everybody else is doing it or you saw it on Twitter or YouTube and
yes, sir.
They're running a 3-4. Well, you might have a 50 defensive. That might be your defense. You know what? You might have a little kid that's hell at nose guard and nobody can block him. He'd be a perfect slant 50 guy.
Yeah.
Not just, we're going to run a 3-4 because my favorite college football team runs it. Man, you got to do what's best for your kids.
Absolutely.
Offensively, defensively, in the weight room, because it's about them. I mean,
no doubt.
That's what it's all about. It's providing them with a great high school experience. And if they're good enough to play at the next level, they will.
Absolutely.
And helping them out, doing what you can do there. So what does your region look like there? I mean, do you have regions or do you have like how is I know when I went to High Point College before I went to Bowman Gray, Wake Forest. Okay. And back then they had 7As and they had a big 7A, little 7A when they got to the playoffs. So they had 14 state champions. And at the time I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Yes. And I went to NC State's coaching clinic. And there was a guy there and they had won, I don't know the name of the school, you probably do. It's in Western North Carolina. They had won like a ridiculous amount of state championships. And he said, you know what? My town does not care that there's big A and little A. All they know is we won a trophy and we were the state champs for that A. Yep. So is that how do your regions and things like that work?
So North Carolina's always been a little odd when it comes to that. And, a little backstory, like when I was in school, North Carolina was divided into 4As. But just like what you were saying is you had small 1A, small or big 1A, small 2A, big 2A. So you had 8 state championships.
That's what it was. It was older, 4. Yeah.
As you get older, you're like, man, this is watered down. Well, now here recently they have gone to 8As. Yeah. They've taken that old kind of South Carolina model where they had the 8As, the big 32 or whatever, so it's still a little watered down in my opinion. That's a whole nother podcast, whole nother episode kind of discussion. But they are divided up into quote unquote conferences. Now the Smoky Mountain Conference, which is what I am about to walk into, is probably what many people in North Carolina would consider your best 1A, 2A conference in football when it comes to football. The school you're probably talking about is Robbinsville. They're in the conference. Murphy where, some good guys went, and they're, still, I think off the top of my head, they may be around 17 state championships. Murphy's probably close to 10. And then you have Swain County, who's probably up there around the 5-6 range. Guys like Heath Schuler went to Swain County. Those are your big three in the conference. Cherokee's sitting there, probably about middle of the road. They won a state championship back in 2017 under Kent Briggs. But we're walking into the hornet's nest per se. Cherokee's a 2A school, but we're 6 kids above the cutoff for 1A. So we are one of the smaller 2A schools when it comes down to it. And the whole big thing with 2A is no matter who comes out of the West, you're going to see Tarboro, where Todd Gurley went to school, coming out of the East, and people almost write their name on the state championship every year. That's just how it's been since I've been in school all the way to now. So we have an uphill battle. Last year they were 3-9. We've got an uphill battle, and again, I had a radio interview last week with a guy at Asheville, and he proceeded to point out, "Hey, Coach, you're the youngest head coach in the Smoky Mountain Conference. Congratulations. How does that feel?" I said, "Well, I've never thought about that until you mention it now, but thanks for the extra weight put on my shoulder, So we're going into some good football, a lot of power, run at you football, smash mouth football, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, old school football."
Nothing wrong with that. And I remember when I was up there, what was odd to me is like if there were 72 teams in your classification, all 72 teams made the playoffs. But what was crazy is you would have like Cherokee would be playing Outer Banks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Western, it was a 7-hour trip to get from the mountains to the beach. Plus,
yes, sir.
I mean, it was like going from all the way in South Georgia to all the way in North Georgia. And I was like, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because they're going to travel so far. Anyway, there are no utopias. There are no perfect ways, perfect states to do it. But you got opportunity, and you're in the toughest conference there is. So how many teams from your conference make the playoffs?
So last year, looking at it, Robbinsville, Murphy, Swain did, I believe Swain made it, Hayesville, Cherokee. So 5 of the 7 made the playoffs last year.
So do y'all do a PSR, like a point system, or how do they do that? Because we've got that in Georgia.
Yeah. So it's
and I'm not a fan, but I'm just saying we got it.
Yeah, that's really it's just that PSR max prep stuff that causes everybody headaches and everybody wants to cuss over. But that's what it comes down to. Who makes the state or who makes the playoffs, and again, playing. Out of that conference, you had Robbinsville, who made the 1A finals last year. You had Murphy, who was, a semifinal team last year. So, your max preps rankings, however that's figured out, is always going to be good, because Murphy and Robbinsville are always going to be good. That's just how it is. So, I know Cherokee last year, even at 3-9, made it in and went down to Albemarle, about middle of the state, and only lost by 6.
That's where T.A. McClendon played.
Yes, sir.
Right there by Thomasville.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. Apparently, if you're in a state and your school is Thomasville, you're going to be good.
No, I'm telling you.
And Albemarle's good too. Or, they've been in the past. I know that. T.A. McClendon, I got to see him play. He was impressive. He was a dude. Yeah. Well, Coach, I should appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Yes, you worked your way up from as a student assistant in college, and then you started at a middle school. You've done it the right way. And go be the youngest coach to win the conference in the history of North Carolina.
Hey,
that would be awesome.
That's definitely the goal.
Well, thanks for being on and sharing your story with us, Coach.
Yes, sir, Chris. I appreciate it, man.